Dear listeners of Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry, this is Joseph, the host of Wake Up Call. John 9 records the miracle of Jesus healing a man who was born blind. As Jesus was walking, he saw a man who had been blind since birth. His disciples asked him whether his blindness was due to the man's sin or his parents' sin. Jesus responded that it was neither. Rather, it was so that the works of God might be revealed in him. The works of God would naturally refer to the process of a person coming to salvation. This miracle of Jesus opening the eyes of a man born blind illustrates how a person gains life through Jesus Christ and how they should live in this world. Today, let us reflect on the story of the man born blind in John 9. His blindness was different from that of others. Most blind people have eyes but have no vision because there are some defects in their eyes, or they do not have enough light into their eyes. However, the man in John 9 had no eyes to begin with. This miracle happened about 6 months before Jesus' crucifixion. That put it in the latter part of his public ministry. By this time, Jesus had already healed many blind people. He restored sight to those who had eyes but couldn't see. However, what is unique about this miracle in John 9 is that Jesus restored the sight of a blind person born without eyes. The healing would involve creating a new body part that was not there before. This kind of healing would be considered impossible by human standards. To heal this man, Jesus made mud and placed it on his eyes, essentially creating new eyeballs. Then, in verse 7, he instructed the man to wash them off in the pool of Siloam. The man obeyed. He washed as instructed and returned with his sight fully restored. This short verse holds deep meaning. To understand the context where this miracle happened, we need to consider the previous chapter of John 8. There, Jesus was engaged in a debate with the Pharisees about his identity. Jesus declared that he was the Son of God, and the Pharisees reacted to that by insulting him, calling him demon-possessed and the son of the devil. They even attempted to stone him, and chapter 8 ends. Despite seeing Jesus with their eyes, they failed to recognize him for who he was. Then, with the confrontation with the Pharisees in John 8 as the underlying context, John 9 introduces the story of the man born blind. This miracle, framed in this way, raises the critical question: who can truly recognize Jesus as the Son of God? Only those to whom Jesus gives new sight can recognize him. Without Jesus opening our eyes, where there were no eyes to begin with, no one can see him for who he truly is. Before the blind man could see Jesus, he had to do something. He had to listen to Jesus' words. He was to go to Siloam and wash his eyes. In other words, he had to believe in Jesus' words and obey them even if they seem impossible. Translated, Siloam means sent. Why was it given this name? It was because King Hezekiah secretly redirected water from the Gihon spring, which was outside the walls of Jerusalem, into the city in preparation for the potential siege from invading forces. The water was channeled from the Gihon spring and gathered at the lowest point inside Jerusalem. After its construction, King Hezekiah concealed the Gihon spring from view. What would be the spiritual significance of the blind man who was instructed to go and wash in the pool of Siloam? It is the story of Jesus, who was sent by God. The water sent through Hezekiah's tunnel sustained the people of Jerusalem when the Assyrians besieged the city in 2 Kings 19. And God struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. In the same way, Jesus was sent to protect us from the attacks of the devil, to give us new life, and to destroy the works of the enemy. The blind man had to walk over to Siloam to do the washing, about a 15-minute walk from the temple, down a steep slope. In this regard, the path to Siloam was significant. As mentioned earlier, Siloam was located at the lowest point in Jerusalem. Even those with sight, it was a challenging path, and the blind man had to make his way down. It teaches us how we should come to encounter Jesus and be healed by him, by going to the lowest place. We must step down from the prideful position of thinking we are fine on our own and be willing to come to a lower place or to a most humble place. It is in that humility that we can be washed by Jesus. The blind man was washed and healed after descending to the lowest place. His eyes were opened. He returned to Jesus with his sight fully restored. Still, the people around him debated whether he was truly the same person. His physical transformation was so dramatic that they claimed that he only resembled the blind man, while others insisted it was him. Finally, they asked him directly if he was the man born blind, and he answered, "Yes, I am that man." Then he testified that Jesus had made mud, placed it on his eyes, and transformed his life, enabling him to see. When we humble ourselves and are washed by Jesus, our lives change. Those around us will be astonished. Is that really the same person we knew? No, it can't be. How could so much change happen? They will wonder. At that moment, we must respond as the blind man did. Yes, I am the same person, and Jesus changed my life. What happens when we begin to testify about Jesus? Eventually, this man who was born blind was brought before the religious leaders for interrogation. Even his parents were summoned and questioned. However, something surprising happened. His parents did not stand by him. Though they knew that he was their son, who testified that Jesus was the one who healed them, they refused to acknowledge it. Why? John 9:22 explains, the Jewish leaders had already decided that anyone who acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. When we believe in Jesus and become a child of God, our relationship with our earthly family might be severed, but we would gain a new family in Christ. That is why Jesus said in Luke 12:53, "Father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law." In Matthew 12:48-50 says, "But he replied to the man who told him, 'Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?' And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, 'Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother.'" Of course, it is a great blessing when our earthly family also becomes our spiritual family, but that is not always the case. Ultimately, the man who was blind was excommunicated by the religious leaders because he testified about Jesus and acknowledged him as the Son of God, the Christ. At that moment, Jesus found him again. The man who had previously only heard Jesus' voice now saw him in person and worshipped him. John 9:38 describes this moment. When we believe in Jesus, we no longer belong to the world. As a result, the world would reject us. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. John 15:18-19. Dear listeners of Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry, have you heard the voice of Jesus, obeyed his words, and been washed so that your spiritual eyes are opened? Has your life changed so noticeably that those around you would find it difficult to recognize you? Do you testify about the Jesus who has transformed your life? Even if following Jesus brings discomfort, hardships, persecution, or even rejection from your community, will you still acknowledge him as Christ? John 9 finishes with these words in verses 39-41. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things, and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." What does this mean? Jesus came to separate those who see and those who are blind. The irony is that those who humbly admit their blindness will be given sight, while those who pridefully believe they already see will remain blind. The prideful will not receive the forgiveness of their sins and will remain in the state of guilt. May we receive the grace to recognize our own blindness. May we descend from our place of pride to a place of humility, so our spiritual eyes may be opened by the grace of Jesus. I look forward to joining you again next week. Goodbye.